All right, thank you, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Matt Johnson. I'm with North Dakota LDEA, and we're here to talk a little bit about transportation and the funding and how that works with the transportation side of things. Our panel today, we have Representative Dan Ruby, Dana Larsen with Ward County, and Grace Demars with McKenzie County. Dan was first elected in 2001, and he chairs the Transportation Committee in the House side. Other avenues where he has ties to the transportation is in the budget section of government operations, a multi-state highway transportation agreement cooperating committee, and special road committee. Dana has been with Ward County since 1999. He's been the Ward County engineer since 2008. He has a BS in civil engineering from University of North Dakota, and he's a past president of North Dakota Association of County Engineers, and he's a director with the North Dakota Association of Counties. Grace has been with, she was originally with consultant, and then she was with Watford City from 2019 to 2022, and has been McKenzie County engineer since 2022. She has a BS in civil engineering from the University of North Dakota. So what I want to do is start off and talk about some of the funding avenues that we have that come from state and federal grants or opportunities, and then ask the panel some questions based on those funding opportunities, how they utilize those. So the biggest funding opportunity the counties have is through the state with their federal CMC routes, their federal aid routes, and that's based on miles of road, population, land area, and the county mill levy. Second area is bridge funding, and we're talking about structures that are longer than 20 feet in length. Currently, bridge funding is funded at $30 million per year. Not so many years ago, it was only $6 million. So it's jumped up a little bit in the past couple of years. Highway safety improvement programs. So the state solicits counties and cities that have traffic safety issues and plans to improve those safety issues. There's $8 million per year in that fund, and the plans need to be consistent with the Vision Zero plan that the state has. So $8 million for 53 counties is not a lot, but it's aimed at safety improvements. Transportation Alternatives Program, that's more for pedestrians and bicycles. There's $6 million per year for that program. Rural Community Enhancement Program. These are multimodal facilities, so they're looking at pedestrian and bicycle facilities through that. Transit grants. There's urban and rural transit grants available. The FLAP program, the Federal Lands Access Program, there's $2 to $3 million in there, but as you can see, the last solicitation was in 2021, and they're now opening up solicitations for 2027. So that program is not an annual program. And then Special Road Fund, these are roadway improvements to help with recreational and tourist endeavors. And it's capped at $300,000 per project, and there has to be a 40% local match. So And the last two I'm going to talk about are recreational trails program and the flexible transportation fund. So the flexible transportation fund is new from the last legislative session, and those were funds that the DOT was able to give to off-system improvements. So anything that wasn't on your state system is in your local county system or township. That's where those funds were able to be used. And that wasn't something that North Dakota DOT had the flexibility to do in the past. So this changed that ability to fund some projects off the state system for counties, cities, townships, and tribal reservations. So what I want to do is talk mainly about the three I feel are the most important: the county federal aid routes, bridge funding, and flexible transportation funding. So one thing, I'll start with, do you guys have a microphone? No. Well, we'll just have to pass it down. So I want to start with Dana and Grace and ask you about what are your budgets look like? You know, what was your 24 budget, and what percentage of that budget did you get funds from either the federal aid routes or bridge funding, those sorts of things?
Yeah, so our 2024 budget, our road and bridge budget specifically, was $115 million. It's tough to know exactly what percentage each different funding source makes up. So I just I'll give you a breakdown of what our revenues are and then where they come from. So road and bridge specific revenues, we get about $3.5 million from general property taxes, and then $15 million comes from Bankhead Jones funding. In 2024, we had about $3 million in federal bridge funds that we used to replace 3 different structures, and then another $1.5 million comes from flood control dollars. Those are probably the biggest revenue generators that the road and bridge department and fund have specifically. And then, but typically a great deal of our funding comes from the general fund, and those this year we anticipate transferring in $52 million from the general fund to the road and bridge fund. Those funds that come from that fund are typically GPT dollars, unorganized district road dollars, highway tax distribution, and then federal entitlement PILT. Some of our budget too, besides the $52 million, will also come from carryover funding from previous years, which is likely made up of a lot of that same money that the general fund dollars that are transferred in is made up of.
What's Bankhead Jones?
Bankhead Jones, I believe, comes from the federal government, from essentially all of the federal lands that are in McKenzie County in lieu of property tax.
So Ward County's budget is not quite $100 and some million. So that's a pretty good sized program that you manage, and hats off. Our budget is around, not including federal aid and other outside grants, is around $15 million. In the past, I would say that backing up quite a few years ago, our budget was mostly made up of basically the highway users fund was covering half, and the mill levy covered about half of our budget. But since some prairie dog dollars have been available, if you count those dollars in, I know our commission has reduced our mills down. So for instance, this year we're down to only about 5.5 mills. So the mill levy does not make up as much of our road budget as it used to in the past. But in general, it's about probably in between $2 to $3 million that would come from property tax. The rest comes from highway users, prairie dog if those dollars come. We've got additional road funding coming in now through sales tax. So there's a half-cent sales tax. So that revenue is finished paying off the jail and the admin building. And the remainder of those funds will now go into road and bridge that we can use for county road and bridge, but we can also use it on township bridges and other assistance out there as well, for as long as it goes strictly to road and bridge. But, and then as far as federal aid, our federal aid amounts to about $150,000 a year. That's our general federal aid that we can either build up and use each year, or we can build it up. Typically, we'll build up 2 years and borrow ahead a year. So you put together maybe a $3-4 million project that you use for a federal aid job. And then in addition to that, for instance, this year I have 4 bridges we're replacing. One of them is over like a river. And that project is about $2.6 million, and we have federal funds to pay for 80% of that. We have another small structure that also received from federal funds. So in general, there's probably about $2.4 million this year in federal aid to help with our bridges, but next year it may only be about $500,000 on one small project. So, and we've done a number of we have other funding sources. We've had flat projects, we've had the highway safety, the HSIP dollars, so I'm not counting those dollars in there as well. So primarily looking at just what is in our general budget. And we receive no funds from the general fund. So there's no money that's transferred in.
Okay. So, is this working? Okay. So one thing I should have brought up when we started is, and it's kind of been a theme throughout the previous presentations, is the infrastructure wasn't there originally to help facilitate the needs of the oil and energy industry. We've come a long ways in making those improvements, especially out in western North Dakota. If you think Highway 2 was 4-lane from Minot to Williston until 2008. So, I mean, it hasn't been that long since some of those improvements have been made. So all the improvements that we've put into our county infrastructure side and our state infrastructure side, they need to be maintained and funded. And you hear it's a big dollar amount from McKenzie County, but they have, what, 2,000 miles of road?
I think 1,200.
1,200. So that's a lot of miles of road for one county to maintain. But it's very important that the counties and cities help get some of this funding that the state provides so they can maintain these roads. So if you want to pass it down to Dan, I just have a question. You know, like, how does the legislative, when you get into legislative session, how do they look at trying to help fund these infrastructure improvements that the counties need to keep industry going in western North Dakota? What's your approach when you consider the funding?
Well, as with everything, it's, you know, what kind of money do we have? What are we going to be seeing? What kind of federal program? What are they offering to the state? Is that going up at all? Do we have to do something to match that to get the federal funds? Because that's key. It's a huge amount of money. So, you know, we look at that first, and obviously when the oil boom took off, and it was imperative that we use funds that were coming in from the tax revenue from the oil, and also all the funds from sales tax, all that. So a lot of general fund dollars for the first time, really. I mean, other than maybe something you know, at a small scale in the past, but it was rare that any general fund dollars went to the roads. It was pretty much from the excise tax, the registration, the gas tax. Then of course later with the SIF fund that came in, the statewide transportation improvement fund, that or SIF is the strategic improvement and investment and improvement fund. So when we started building that up and money was coming in there. That actually got called sometimes General Fund 2 because it was used for a lot of different projects, but one of the key ones was certainly roads. So we look at that. We have the STIP that comes in, and that's the statewide transportation improvement fund, or improvement plan from the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute, and we look at that obviously, and I know that DOT uses that extensively. It's a 4-year lookout, but it's updated every year. So that is something they try to adhere to very, very closely, but it's kind of like what can we do to enhance the funding in any way to get some of those projects done. And a lot of times it's, like you mentioned, Highway 2, that was bonded. That was one of the first major bonding that the state did because we generally always paid for it in cash. And then you said it was finished in '08. It had as much traffic on it in about 8 years as they expected in 20. So right away it was taking some wear and tear. So that was an issue as well, as maintaining that. So there's a lot of money that we had to prioritize to go not only to help. I know a lot of counties bumped up their engineered roads to the 105.5 level, which they never were. It was just a whole new mindset that had to take place, and the funding is never completely adequate. And now we are talking a lot more about bridges as well. So I'll just leave it there. I know you have some more questions.
So you brought up the state has their STIP plan. I'm going to ask both Dana and Grace, what does the county have? Do you have a capital improvement plan that you follow? And what does that look like?
So backing up a long time ago, we used to have which was called a farm to market mill levy, and in that we typically did a public input meeting and established a 5-year plan. That kind of got changed here a few years back about the mill levy, and of course Ward counties, the mills that go to roads are much less today, and there's a lot additional funding coming from different sources. So we actually in 2019 did a public input meeting and developed a full transportation plan that looked in general what did the public want, and looking at whether it's improved load carrying capacity, is it more paved roads, is it safety improvements, what were they looking at? And the answer was yes, they want all of that. So and we went through and we looked at, okay, so we have our county major collectors, and we have our regular county roads. We actually established some regionally significant corridors. These are roads that may have 1,000, 600 to maybe 15 to 4,000 vehicles a day on them. And those were basically what we wanted to focus on over the next 20 years. And looking at improving the load capacity and the safety, possibly widening, carrying that load. So we kind of adopted that, and that's kind of been our direction that we're going. And then I use that to kind of develop anywhere from a 5 to a 10-year plan. So the problem is how much funding do you have and what's the cost? So it's been a little more challenging. It's more like a list that you go ahead and kind of go down. And if you have more funding and the cost is coming in more reasonable, you get to do more projects. So it's almost like it slides up and down. So I can't call it a 5-year plan and I can't call it a 10-year plan, but it's a list of projects and goals that we want to eventually get through. And I guess that's kind of how our system kind of works. If we know the funding level and if the costs would settle down, I think we could nail that down a little bit closer. But the last, I would say 4 years, have just been challenging to try to put together what you're going to have. Is Prairie Dog going to be there? Look at 2020 to 2024 and the different funding levels. So.
So McKenzie County has historically had capital improvement plans. The last one that was actually approved by the commission was in 2022. So that's one thing that we're going to be focusing on is developing a capital improvement plan and making sure that we have the buy-in from the public, we have the buy-in from the commission. We're working through the planning process of that right now. So we recently did a pavement condition index study, which hasn't historically been done in the county, to just evaluate all of our existing pavements, and then also we're taking traffic counts throughout the county too to help us prioritize where we should be putting that the funding and prioritizing projects. We recently got a public works subcommittee that has 2 commissioners on it, so we'll be doing a lot of that at that level and then continuing to bring it up to the county commission for their final approval.
And part of what makes it a little difficult is the time it takes to take a project from, imagining it to completion, to get plans put together. It's a several-year process. It doesn't happen as quick as it used to. And then the other part of it is the costs of doing a project. What have you seen? What's your experience been with how have the costs increased in the past few years?
Yeah, so I was originally at the county in 2018 and 2019, and then I went to the city for a couple years, and now I'm back here. So I was looking at numbers that we used to estimate in the 2019 timeframe. For a asphalt paving reconstruction project, we are estimating those type of projects at $1.5 million a mile, and now we're estimating them closer to $3 million a mile. Our box culverts and structure replacements have definitely gone up as well. And then just from a maintenance side of things, we use class 13 modified aggregate surfacing on our roads primarily, and looking at those numbers, when we bid those out in 2019, from the pit location to the stockpile, it was anywhere from $15 to $17 a ton, and now we're looking at $27 to $37 a ton. So that's a pretty significant increase. And then looking at just our dust control as well, in 2019 our mag chloride was 98 cents a gallon, and now it's $1.26 dollars per gallon. So our costs have pretty dramatically increased.
And just for those that don't know, McKenzie County spends about $8 million in mag chloride.
Just the product, yeah.
Just the product every year. So that's a large number, but they got a lot of miles to cover too.
So just in general, I would say that our costs for just general paving and road construction in the last 3-4 years is up about 25 to 35%. I would say small structures and grading are probably up 50%. And structures themselves, bridge structures, I would say have doubled. An example would be in 2010, I replaced basically built a 100-foot long bridge over the Des Lacs River. In 2018, upstream of that, we put in about a 110 foot long bridge. That was about $1.4 million. And this year we just put in a bridge also over the Des Lacs, a little more upstream, and that was about 98 feet. Very similar structure to the one we did in 2010, and that was $2.3 million. So you can see just from 2019 to this year, it's more than doubled the cost. Part of that is materials, part of that is availability of contractors. Our aggregate, that's doubled, but we're lucky, we have more aggregate in Ward County, so our prices went from $4.50 for modified gravel to about $13, so over about 6 years. But our haul is only maybe 8-10 miles. We have multiple pits. The downside of that is, I think last year over 500,000 tons of gravel was hauled out of Ward County to neighboring counties for either state, most of them were state funded projects. I'm sure there's probably some that were county, but a lot of them were state projects on state highways or missile site graveling, and all that went across our roads, and it definitely caused an impact. And there's no There's no sales tax that you get off of that because that's delivered to the point of sale. There's no royalty, there's no nothing, so those are, that's a direct expense that doesn't cause that. Did I hit your topic, or did I go off too?
No, that's good. I was going to turn it back over to Dan. So the legislature, you guys use the need study that's Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute develops. How do you use that information? And then is there anywhere in there that you're looking at adding in these inflation costs that the counties and other entities are seeing?
Well, I would say that's probably used more by DOT. I mean, obviously they come to us for the funding, and there's projects that we try to earmark some funds specifically for. There's some for Highway 85, there's some for some other roads in different areas, and so there are a few that are specified in the appropriations budget based off of that information. And as far as the inflationary, I mean, there's really nothing. I mean, we get most of our funding, as I said before, comes from the registration fees. There's nothing that goes up on that on an inflationary basis. There's been little talk about doing that with any gas tax, although I think South Dakota did that. We really haven't. I mean, there's nothing that we've tried to apply on an inflationary basis to it, just trying to keep up with a lot of that. You know, some of the, I think Dana hit on the cost a little bit of the other side of with the cost of the inflation is finding contractors, and right now for the next few years, the bridge builders, the major ones, are going to be all working in Cass County. And a lot of the big contractors that do the dirt work and that are going to be working on their flood protection, and so they're already pretty much putting the warning out. I had a big project up in the northwest corner of the state for my company, and we got one bid, and I know that there's been a bridge that has been bid out 3 times in western or middle part of North Dakota that nobody even bids on it. So that's going to be a real issue. That's going to, you know, because by the time you can start to find people to do that, then of course the costs are going to be even higher than they are now. So the efforts to try to inject funds to speed up the process is not going to be as used as easy. And I did ask the question that there was, like for the city of Minot with their flood protection, we tried to do some, aggressive funding and kind of put them on some fast track to take advantage of some of the savings that they would get by finishing the project sooner, and they're falling into the same problem that they just don't have. They just don't have the contractors to do the work any faster than they are right now. So that's going to be a real issue. We would love if we had something that was inflationary based, because we know the cost of highways is going way up. I think a 4-lane highway now is $11 million per mile to do a 4-lane. The interstate per mile, I think, is something like $5 million a mile to do the concrete on one of the directions. So the costs are just astronomical. And I can remember, you know, a highway, doing a mile of highway was like $1 million back, 15 years ago. 18 years ago, something like that. So obviously the costs are a lot higher, and we just have to look at revenue that's coming in. We have tried some things, as I know you want to get to here in a bit, about the flexible transportation fund and that. So there's some of those things that we're trying to use to address some of the needs that not only for the state highway system but also the cities and counties.
Yeah, and we're running out of time quicker than I'd hoped, but going to the flexible funding, it seems to be a good place for some of those dollars. There was $42.9 million put into the non-oil counties and cities and townships, and then roughly about 40 million that went to oil counties. What's the legislative's take on how that program's worked? Is it something that you're going to try to improve upon or do again, or where does that stand?
Yeah, from what I've heard from DOT, it is very popular, and will be, there's way more requests and needs for it than the funding was there for. So I think it'll be continued. I think that's something that, I think a portion of the excise tax went into that, and we used some, I think some funds from the Bank of North Dakota, or no, from the SIF fund. So the SIF fund dollars went to that too. So I think that's going to be, as when they come back to us, I think the message is going to be that is very popular. It was helpful because basically it helps a lot of the cities and counties match the federal dollars. It allows the state to help with the engineering and some of the other administrative costs. And more rural counties and smaller towns that qualify don't always have that expertise. So I think it's going to be something that'll be continued. When the applications opened up, there was over $400 million in requests, for $40 million. So you can obviously see there's quite the need there. One thing, the townships in non-oil producing counties had to have their mill levy maxed out at 18 mills. Yep. Heard quite a bit of pushback from some of the townships regarding that. Is that probably going to stay the same? I understand you want to have the township have skin in the game. It cuts both ways, I guess. Is that something you see staying? Even though I've been put on the budget section in the interim here, since we've had some Minot legislators who, one resigned and moved out of state and the other one passed away, I haven't really been involved in the discussions during session with that. The actual policy bill for the flexible transportation funding came to my transportation committee, and our committee approved it. And I took it to appropriations and explained what it was, and they kind of had a heads up on it. I think they knew what it was about. But that's traditionally what happens when the policy committee has a fund bill with funds in it. The chairman in the House has to go to the appropriations committee and sell it, basically. And what they did is then put it out as a do not pass, but they moved all the language into the budget. So they did that a lot in appropriations committees this last session, and I kind of complained about it because it didn't give people a chance to vote up or down on some of the policy, and not necessarily this one, but in some others. But that being said, I wasn't involved with the mill discussion, and with the reasoning. Obviously, there's some matching and assistance that they're doing with it. So, I guess just make certain that they have the funds to do that. And there's always this issue with the property rich and property poor counties and townships and that. So, I'd be interested, I guess, myself to even hear what the discussion was on the mills, but I'm sure that'll be a topic of discussion at the next session either way.
All right, we got a few minutes left. I did want to touch on bridge funding, so I'm going to back up a little bit. When you look at the needs study, there's over $1 billion in needs for bridge funding, and we're funding it at $30 million a year. So it doesn't take much of a mathematician to figure out that's a lot of years that we'd have to fund that bridge funding just to make a dent in that need. Statewide, there's 749 posted bridges and 103 that are closed. And then a new thing that Upper Great Plains did in their needs study is they analyzed minor structures, so structures less than 20 feet in length, and there's $812 million in need there. But I did want to ask Dana and Grace, what do you have for posted and closed bridges? You know, kind of what is the outlook for each of your counties on bridge side?
So I've got about 70 some bridges on the longer than 20 feet. I have one that's closed, but it'll be removed next year because it is less than a mile away from a new bridge we just got done building. So it doesn't really make sense to invest $2 million over the Des Lacs River when there's a bridge that's less than a mile away. So that's our only closed one that's over 20. And then we've got 2 small under 20-foot bridges on township parade trails that are closed. One is going to be removed, one's going to be replaced, but that's it for closed. As far as load restricted, I believe we had about 9 bridges at the beginning of this year that were restricted on over 20, and we've got probably about 9 that were under 20 feet, so small, minor structures. This year we're pulling 4 of them off this year. And the next year we'll be pulling 5 more off that list. Most of that will be with local funds because a lot of those are 20, 25-foot bridge structures that we're going to be replacing with local funds. Either the sales tax, and the county did put some of its ARPA dollars towards the replacement of those. So most of those bridges are, in fact, all of those bridges except for one were on township roads, lower volume, but they definitely access a lot of ag land. So getting them back up, I got to tell you, we just opened one up yesterday. We finished replacing it. We used multiple. We couldn't get a box culvert, so we used multiple sections of 73 by 43 inch arch pipe. So there's 5 runs rather than using one large box, using multiple pipe sections. We were able to get that pipe, get it installed. Contractor did it in about 10 days. Got that open again, and he called me, and he was so happy. Almost everybody in that whole township was just tickled pink that this bridge is back open, and in fact it's better than it was when a bridge, because now they can drive their large farm equipment across it like they couldn't before. So, that's our goal, is to try to eliminate as many of those posted bridges as possible.
And just for everybody's information, to get a box culvert built, you're looking at over a year before you could get one. If you ordered it today, you wouldn't get it till a year and a half from now. So that's been kind of a problem for local agencies too.
Yeah, so in McKenzie County, we're replacing 8 structures this year. And when it's all said and done, we'll have 92 major structures and 20 minor structures. After this year, we will be down to 5 major structures that are posted. One we hope to get bid out as soon as possible. It's not closed. We don't have any closed bridges, but we do have one that's down to 1 lane, and it's like a 16-ton road. So we hope to bid that out actually at our next commission meeting. And then we have, let's see, another 3 that we hope to replace in the next 1 to 2 years to help bring down the number of posted structures in McKenzie County.
And the one thing, when we talked about it earlier, Grace brought up that maybe a bridge might not be posted for weight, but it isn't able to carry the overweight loads, the oversized loads. So that makes the load pass part of it a little bit more difficult, because you're going to have to take a different route because that structure isn't able to take that overweight. And that is a problem for you in McKenzie, right?
Yeah, I mean, with ConocoPhillips sitting here, we had a structure that they kept trying to go down, and I don't think the loads were quite handling it, so they actually built an alternative route around the structure because it was really the only way in. So we struggle with that a little bit too, is when these older structures and with the updated way that they do the load ratings, they're not able to handle some of the overweight loads. We kind of got to get creative with them. So do you experience that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So even with like say we have a bridge and it can easily pass anything 105.5, and a lot of times they can even pass, even up to like 150,000 pounds. You start getting into 200 and 300,000 pound loads, and then they start getting those axles closer together. You don't have the bridge length, and you have bridges that have larger spans. So a short span bridge isn't so bad, but let's say you have 50-foot spans on a bridge, you have a lot more weight in that area. And these older bridges that were HS20 designed, they just just can't look at that. So we'll have to work with, sometimes we got to contact Bridge Department in Bismarck to have them run that analysis on that particular unit to see if we can get it across. So like I said, you can have loads up to 500,000 pounds, and if the bridging is good enough, sometimes it's no problem. But when those axles get closer together, it becomes an issue, and you have to find an alternate route, and you don't know that. Nice thing about low passes, now we have that axle configuration, that spacing to let us review that, because we definitely do not want a bridge to fail.
So we just have a few minutes left. I'm going to open it up for questions. If anybody has questions of any of our panelists, we would take some. No questions? All right, well.
I would just want to add one thing. With the challenge of inflation and contractors and availability, I would say the number one thing that we can do is have a consistent funding source that we can plan. Engineers, we like to plan. We like plans. We don't like when plans change. Yep. So, but contractors, if they know there's going to be consistent money for projects going forward, they'll gear up, they'll build. But if you have 1 year where you have a ton of money and the next 2 years you don't, they're like, now they're laying off, they have that old equipment. So the biggest thing when it comes to bridges, comes to road improvements, having that consistent funding source to help us come up with a plan. They'll look at that 5-year plan and they'll go, hey, there's 5-10 years of work here. I'm willing to invest and buy the equipment and bring on the employees to do this work, because I think that's one of our biggest keys to get through this.
Yeah. And that's one of the challenges with the Prairie Dog bill. I was a co-sponsor of that, but I remember the discussion was, don't plan on it until we tell you it's going to be really close to making it, or that it is going to make it. So it doesn't really allow the counties and cities to plan for that ahead of time and budget something, a project that they have a need for. Unfortunately, it's great when it comes, and it was a good way to get that money out, specifically to the non-oil producing counties as well. But I believe they said the money is, if it's not already coming, it's coming pretty quick in this biennium. So that's a good thing that the buckets are filling up at this point. But like you say, it can always change, and it's hard to budget for. So certainly we will always keep that in mind. And I know the legislators that work on these budgets all the time, especially with the road funding and other infrastructure needs. Whether it's something we can do inflationary or not, I don't know, but I do see the need for some security in knowing what's coming, some certainty and some funds so you can work. But again, getting the assistance, we probably were the most generous to DOT this session, where we did give with the flexible transportation funding. We also then gave them discretion to, when they secure federal grants, that they have the ability to use those, and gave them some funds to match those funds too. So that was something they didn't have to just come to the budget section all the time and work through. So we gave them a lot more freedom and flexibility and discretion than we ever have since I've been in the legislature.
I just want to follow up or finish up with, we have 2 county engineers up here, but all the counties across, especially the western North Dakota, they're doing a great job trying to keep their facilities up and that investment in their infrastructure, make it more viable, or as viable as they can. So I think we should just acknowledge all of our county staff that's out there, or city staff that's out there, for making it as good as it was. Because if you look back 20 years ago, our infrastructure was not very good. We put a lot of effort into making it what it is, whether it's from legislative help or the counties themselves. But thank the panelists and give them a big round of applause.